Hello. I did run down the stairs. Leadership and trust, right? I can't be trusted to tell the time. So my pocket started vibrating. I looked at my computer, 106. I thought, well, that's odd. So my apologies. This training series, I want to thank you all for coming in person. Those who are going to see this online, tomorrow's version, the time and commitment that you're putting in, this actually is not being done in other agencies. This is super cool. I was talking with both Armin and Lance yesterday. They don't want credit, so this is completely off the cuff. I spoke to some of their peers this morning. They don't just get together on the Friday before this session, throw a few things on a whiteboard, cram for 2 hours, and then get up here and wax poetic for a little bit. Hours and hours are going in, not just for the session that's coming up, but for the entire series. The commitment that you all are putting in to invest on a monthly basis, the commitment that they're doing, the HB 104, the required supervisor mandatory training that will be part of the bill that parts of it start taking effect here in May. The Department of Workforce Services is so much further ahead of where other agencies are, and it's the commitment that Casey has put forth, the two trainers here, all of you. I just want to tell you thank you. Today's topic, I'm obsessed with the things that are on Armin's board, and he's assured me that he will replicate some of them today. Leadership and trust. You have individuals who are high performers, right? It's not rhetorical. I will call upon you because I'm starting to catch my breath. I'm stalling until that breath comes back. And the incident report for spraining my ankle on the second floor is coming too. So you have high performers, but what about their attitudes? There may be some who can perform at an extremely high level, but a little bit challenging to work with, right? Are those easy people to work with? How many of you are in this room right now? I'm catching my wind. It's coming. Don't worry. I see somebody pointing at Weston. Is there something you'd want to share? Okay, well, John, we need to have a conversation apparently. So part of the conversation today is your perfect employee is someone who can perform well, has the right aptitude and attitude for the position. But what we want to help prepare and teach and talk about is the not perfect. All right. Hey, I just need to know so I can do this thing with my hands. Are you going to do your box chart?
I'm deciding.
Well, it will help me.
Yes, we're going to do the chart.
Okay. Armin's very color-coded. Green boxes are good. Not all of our employees fit in the green boxes. I promise this will make sense. And for those of you who watch this afterward, it will make sense. The people who perform well but have some attitudinal challenges, what do you want to do with them? Do you want to have a whole team of them? No. Do you want to keep them? For those of you who are saying yes, reserve judgment till roughly 4 o'clock today. Because I failed that same test yesterday with Armin, by the way. The people you want are both, they have the aptitude and the attitude, right? They are the high performers. And so part of today's conversation, part of today's training is how to move people along that spectrum so that we can get from whatever the color coding ends up being today, but it's the lower right, the good green. So with that, I just, again, wanted to tell you thank you for coming. Thank you for engaging, not only the listening part, but the breakout sessions. And with that, Armin, Lance?
Yeah, I got it.
Armin.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. So it's going to be the top right, but you know.
I already failed. Publicly correct.
Before we really get started into what we truly want to talk about today, I want you to know that everything that we've done up to this point this year has really been very intentionally built the way that we have it. And what I mean by that is we didn't just put together ideas of topics that are important and then put them on the calendar to fit them, but we've actually slotted these because we felt like we wanted to build. And so it's important, and I want you to be thinking back to what we've done previous, and we'll go through a few of the slides here, but if you remember in January, we spent some time talking about building relationships and how to do those and why those relationships are important and how building a good relationship with people results in better results, not just emotionally, but also from the standard of the work that you're actually going to be doing. And then the idea, the hope, if you haven't done this, don't raise your hand. But the hope is that after January, you spent some time actually considering those things and thinking about some of the people on your team with whom maybe you don't have the very best relationship, and that you've been considering, what can I do to address that circumstance, to fix that relationship, to make that something that can be more productive and more valuable for both of us. And then we pivot over into February, where we talked about having difficult conversations, because quite frankly, those are part of leadership. You chose to get into a field, regardless of what your job is, the fact that you became a supervisor, you chose to become part of a field of individuals who are responsible for other individuals. Simon Sinek, who will be spending a fair amount, does anybody know who Simon Sinek is? He's one of the kind of the leadership and business leaders, thought leaders of the world right now. He's done several books. He's done a lot of different things. He's a researcher and writer. He likes to talk about the fact that, leaders are not responsible for the numbers. I want you to think about that for a second. As leaders, you are not responsible for the numbers. You are responsible for the people who are responsible for the numbers. And that always has to be first and foremost in your mind. And so we pivot over to difficult conversations. Sometimes you're going to have those. As a leader, you have to be able, from a capacity standpoint, and willing to engage in the difficult conversations to help people to improve. Because your responsibility is not the numbers that they produce. Your responsibility is them. And if they aren't learning and growing and getting better and doing more things and better things, even if they're hitting their numbers, you're failing as a leader. Because your responsibility is them. So then we pivoted just a little bit from there. We talked last month about performance improvement and discipline plans. And we wanted to get that very intentionally because those are very critical things. They have to be done in a very specific way. And we have to make sure that we're addressing those contemporaneously, which means something bad happens, we address it immediately thereafter so that there's a clear connection between what we're doing and what they did. And so we want to make sure that you understood those. And so this month, we want to spend some time talking about the nexus that exists between not just getting people to do their work, to get the performance, to meet the metrics, but to also address the impact that they are having on the team, on the organization, on you as a leader, and how we address those things and why, and how we then build a better team. Not just a better relationship with the individual, but build a team of individuals who all have better relationships with each other and with ourselves. All right, so Lance is going to spend a little time on psychology.
You'll have to mute when I go on.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're going to conflict. Okay, great. So thank you, Armin. So we're going to talk about, he's going to dig into this idea of trust versus performance, that nexus. But before we do that, allow me to take a moment and set the stage. Some of this will sound a little bit familiar because we've addressed a little bit of it previously. But I'm a fan of asking why. And what I mean by that, my 17-year-old the other day just said this to me. He says, "Dad, you're obnoxious." He says, "You won't ever just answer my questions. You always answer my questions with a question." I'm like, "I'm trying to teach you, dude, because in a year or two, you're going to be gone, and you've got to figure this out." So I like to ask the question why often, because oftentimes what we see on the outside, right, the symptom is not usually what is truly indicative of what's going on. And that's true when it comes to challenges with performance, conduct issues, problems on the team. We can ask ourselves why, and oftentimes we have to ask ourselves why a few different times to get to the root cause. But as a reminder, we talked a little bit in the first session in January about the brain and its role in human behavior. and leadership. There's a profound connection, and this is something that personally I've had to spend a lot of time studying because some of you have heard the stories about my 13-year-old Clark who has ADHD, and it's really fascinating to learn about what's going on in the brain and the impact that has on him, his performance in school, his interactions with others, his relationships. I mean, he's one of the smartest kids that I've ever met, and yet struggles academically. Okay? Well, there's a reason for that. There's a number of reasons for that, but that's neither here nor there. But the reason I bring it up is because sometimes we on a team or in an organization can have essentially organizational ADHD. Okay? There are three primary functions of what we call the executive functioning part of the brain. I'm looking at some of you WDD people because you learned a lot about this in motivational interviewing and what have you. But there's two parts of the brain that we're going to address just very briefly. There's what has historically been called the lizard part of the brain. That's the brain stem. Okay? And then there's the prefrontal cortex, which is the executive functioning part of the brain. And very briefly, the responsibility of the lizard brain, which is supposedly, according to science and the research, it's older, and it is the part of the brain that's responsible for protecting us, keeping us safe, right? If there's a danger, then we will, everybody knows it, fight, flight, or freeze, right? And it's important that that part of the brain is continually functioning. It's not like, I think I maybe used this metaphor, I don't want to be standing on a train track, right? Hear the horn and be thinking to myself, well, okay, if I kind of calculate the distance and I multiply that by what I think is the speed of the train, I probably have enough time for me to finish my lunch and get off the train track. That's dumb, right? In that moment, you need to be safe. You need that part of your brain to kick in. You got to get off the track, right? But for the most part, in the work that we do, although there are some exceptions, looking at you, Brooke. Brooke gives me this look like, I know where you're going with this. We don't have to as often concern ourselves with physical safety, but there's another thing that we're going to talk about in a moment called psychological safety. Okay, and the executive functioning part of the brain is responsible for three elements. I'm going to write them: focus, inhibition, and working memory. Okay, in other words, that in order for me truly to be able to effectively perform in any role or responsibility I have to be able to focus, right, on the work that I have responsibility for. I have to have the ability to inhibit certain behaviors and practices that will get in the way of me performing that duty and responsibility. And then I have to ever be present in my mind, remember why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. Hey, why does it matter? Why is it significant? How does it contribute to the greater good, the mission of the department? Now, here's the thing. As supervisors, we have a responsibility that is very directly related to this. Our responsibility is first and foremost to reduce whenever possible within our control the things that might trigger the lizard response in the brain. Okay? And so the department, and we've had these conversations even with Greg, and I've overheard him just working at trying to make sure that every aspect of the jobs that we do, particularly for those frontline that have to interact with customers, that they're physically safe. Okay, so that's one example of how that comes into play. But the reality is there's all kinds of ways that we might be triggered that have nothing to do with true physical safety, but our bodies respond to it that way. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of those things and talk about some examples of how we might actually unintentionally, as a leader, trigger that fight, flight, or freeze in some of our people. Then the other responsibility that we have, second, is to help our teams to better, as I mentioned before, focus on the things that matter, inhibit doing the things that don't, and then working memory is, of course, to stay focused on the purpose. Okay? It does require some effort on our part as leaders to, on occasion, in staff meetings, in our one-on-one conversations, help people to see the big picture. I like the way that Stephen Covey described it in his one of his books. He described a leader as one who, you say your team is traipsing through the jungle. Okay? You're on a journey. And the leader's responsibility is to, on occasion, climb up one of those trees, to look at the landscape and survey what the challenges and the issues are that are out there, and then come down and help the rest of the team see that vision and understand. And that's our responsibility. Occasionally, we have to bring to memory to those people that we have responsibility for what we're really doing, why it matters. Okay? So once again, we're going to inhibit the things that get in the way of their performance, and we're going to try and encourage the things that will help them to perform at their best. Now, I mentioned this phrase, psychological safety. Let me give you an example. So there's a researcher, she's a professor at Harvard. Her name is Amy Edmondson. In the late 1990s, they were doing some research. What they were finding is that in many hospitals, there were a pretty significantly high number of errors. And the range of errors as far as the severity, they run the spectrum. So there were some pretty insignificant but pretty significant errors in these hospitals that resulted, of course, in people losing their lives. And at first, as they started to dig into the research and study different teams, one of the things that came out of the research that was really interesting and a little bit confusing to her and concerning was that, now listen carefully, first I have to make sure I actually say it right. What they found is that the teams that were the most cohesive made more mistakes. Did I say that right? You're saying, I don't know, you're the one who's supposed to be talking, but... And whereas the teams, okay, got thumbs up from Armand, whereas the teams who did not show any of the indicators and the characteristics of being truly cohesive and effective teams actually made fewer mistakes. Okay? Interesting, right? Now, there's a catch. Because as she began to dig in a little bit more, what do you think she found out? Yeah, she actually found out the opposite. Here's the reality. What she found out is the teams that were truly cohesive, that effectively worked together, had strong relationships, and felt safe in their work, guess what they were willing to do? They were willing to report their mistakes. That was the distinction. So the teams that were actually less effective, that did not have those strong relationships, that cohesiveness, right, or the collaborative effort and the spirit, they just were unwilling to report because they didn't feel safe. For whatever reason, a number of reasons, they didn't report the mistakes. So when you dig in deeper, the reality was that those other teams were actually making more mistakes and even more significant mistakes, but they just would hide them. They would keep them under the rug because of the concern of what might be the impact to them individually and to the team and what have you. Okay? And so she coined a phrase called psychological safety, and it's been around for a little over a decade. And I recently listened to an interesting podcast, and she said she doesn't love the phrase anymore. She's like, it just kind of got out there and there wasn't anything I could do about it. So it's really caught on, but she doesn't like it because she said, sometimes I think there's a misunderstanding about what it means. She says, a lot of people think of psychological safety, they think cozy. Oh, I'm bundled up in a blanket and I'm safe and I'm warm. And she says, no, that's not what we're talking about. As a matter of fact, some of the most psychologically safe environments and teams are ones where they push back against each other, where they're very candid with each other. They're very open and honest about their feedback, and they push each other and they challenge each other. But, of course, I think we all know, but the distinction is they do care about each other. They're invested in each other. And because of that, they can be candid with each other. They can call each other out when they make mistakes, but then they learn from those mistakes and they move on. That's a truly psychologically safe environment. Okay? And so we're going to talk about how this idea of psychological safety is such a key element of this idea of trust and how it comes into play. Now, let me give you one other example that kind of reinforced this. After she coined this phrase and she released her Harvard Business Review article, Google, they decided to run an experiment. And for 5 years, they ran what they were calling Project Aristotle. And their effort in Google was to find the characteristics or attributes that made the perfect team. Okay? And so they were mixing up, they were shuffling, they were doing all these different combinations, they were looking at all the possible variables. They were looking at all kinds of things like education, experience, background, race, gender, you name it. They were looking at all these different variables, and then they were mixing and matching, and they were trying different combinations to find the most effective teams. Okay? And guess what they found out? None of those variables really mattered. They really were not terribly significant in contributing to whether the team was successful. Guess what was the most significant factor? This was a separate study, mind you, that Google discovered. After 5 years of this research, they found out that the most effective teams were the teams that were psychologically safe. The ones where people pushed each other, they worked hard, they were candid with each other, but they felt safe and supported. They felt like they could voice their concerns. They could come to their supervisor and say, hey, I realize that there's this policy, this procedure, and there's this directive, and I'm all on board, but let me tell you how this is actually playing out on the front lines. Let me help you understand some of the implications and problems that this is causing for me and my ability to do my job, the impact on the customer, and then that supervisor's open and receptive. They may not have total control over making changes, but they listen. And they say, okay, all right, well, let's see what we can do to tackle this moving forward. Those were the most effective teams that Google found. Really fascinating. There's a lot of research, and you can dig into that a little bit more. So now let's talk about, Armin's going to introduce this idea of the relationship between trust and performance, why it matters so much, and why I have examples in my own work life, and I don't know if I'll have an opportunity to share too many of them, but I've had examples of when I personally or with a team have been hyper-focused on certain performance metrics at the expense of other things and have unintendedly caused issues or problems. Not things that I intended to, but other issues and problems that in the grand scheme of things were more problematic. You unmuted? We've got really great transitions here, right? You should high five. Are you ready? Yeah, go team.
We're such nerds, Lance. Oh my gosh. Okay, so the relationship between trust and performance. I mentioned this about Simon Sinek earlier. We're actually going to watch him really quickly. He's going to introduce an idea. I'm going to be doing something up on the board here while he's introducing an idea. Here's your challenge. You don't pay attention to me. You pay attention to Simon. He's saying the important things. I'm just setting something up, okay? You got about 2 minutes.
I've worked with the Navy SEALs, and I asked them, like, how do you pick like the guys that go on SEAL Team 6? Right? Because they're the best of the best, the best, the best. And they drew a graph for me. And on one side, they wrote the word performance, and on the other side, they wrote the word trust. The way they define the terms is performance on the battlefield and performance off the battlefield. So this is your skills. This is, did you make your quarterly earnings, however you want to translate it, right? Performance, it's traditional. This is, how are you off the battlefield? What kind of person are you? The way they put it is, I may trust you with my life, but do I trust you with my money and my wife? This is what they told me. Nobody wants this person, the low performer of low trust, of course. Of course, everybody wants this person, the high performer of high trust, of course. What they learned is that this person, the high performer of low trust, is a toxic leader and a toxic team member. And they would rather have a medium performer of high trust, sometimes even a low performer of high trust, it's a relative scale, over this person. This is the highest performing organization on the planet, and this person is more important than this person. And the problem in business is we have lopsided metrics. We have 1,000,001 metrics to measure someone's performance and negligible to no metrics to measure someone's trustworthiness. And so what we end up doing is promoting or bonusing toxicity in our businesses, which is bad for the long game because it eventually destroys the whole organization. The irony is it's unbelievably easy to find these people. Go to any team and say, who's the asshole? And they'll... they will all point to the same person. Equally, if you go to any team and say, who do you trust more than anybody else? Who's always got your back? And when the chips are down, they will be there with you. They will also all point to the same person. It's the best gifted natural leader who's creating an environment for everybody else to succeed, and they may not be your most individual highest performer. But that person, you better keep them on your team.
Sorry, I'm trying to do this 2 times here, but I wanted to talk a couple of things about what he talked about, or mention a couple of things what he talked about. Because I think what he's saying is really incredibly important. So obviously, of course, everybody wants the high trust, high performance individual, right? That's the norm. And he was talking about how the Navy SEALs, and we got to make just a couple of small distinctions here with the Navy SEALs, because one of the things he had said in his little snippet there was this idea that the low trust, high performance person is toxic. And I agree with that. Right? Got to come over here and do it over here so they can see it too. Yeah, I know you're supposed to be, but I know. But the thing that he made a statement about, which I just made a small distinction for, is he was talking about the fact that in the SEALs, they actually would prefer a person who is high trust, medium performance over somebody who is high performance, low trust. He also mentioned that they would have the same thoughts for the low-performing, in some cases, high-trust person. I'm going to make a distinction here, okay? Does anybody know what the Navy SEALs are at their core? If you're going to describe them, what are they? They're technically not soldiers. They're sailors, which I learned recently is a big deal to them. Like, they're not soldiers. The Navy SEALs is the top performing Tier 1 Special Forces unit in the world. Hard stop. Everybody in Special Forces, no matter who they are, no matter what country they come from, no matter what branch of service they come from, everybody wants to either be or be like the Navy SEALs. They are the model for the world for Special Forces. Hard stop. When they're talking, what he's talking about is the team that's called SEAL Team 6 and how they pick their best, how they pick who's going to be on that team. Now, I don't know why SEAL Team 6, as opposed to SEAL Team 1, is the top of the top. But for whatever reason they came up with, SEAL Team 6 is you take all the SEALs, the top Special Forces group in the world, hard stop, and you take the very, very best of them, and they put that into SEAL Team 6, essentially, right? They're the best of the best. That's the top team ever. And he's saying, well, they would take a low-performing, high-trust person on that team rather than a low-trust, high-performance person on that team. That may be true. It doesn't apply to us. It just can't, right? Because the lowest performing SEAL, the lowest performing individual member of the SEAL teams is still an exceptionally high performing individual, higher than everybody else in the world. Relative scale, right? For the things that they do. Now, I'm not saying you're not good at your jobs. I'm not saying you don't do awesome work. Not saying I'm not good at my job. But none of us are SEAL Team 6ers, right? So when we're talking about low performance, this might get me in trouble.
But who are you going to go to?
I know, who's going to go to, right? Who are you going to complain to? But I'm going to tell you that on this scale, if you have low-performing people, we need to exit them. Period.
Can I make a distinction? Because now I'm going to push back.
Go.
If we've done what's necessary to support and to right? Yeah.
Yes. So yes, you have a low-performing people. Let me
was
say.
like ready to go fire everyone.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice?
Bottom third, you're gone.
Yeah, you need to have done all the things that you have, that we can, right? Yeah. That's what we did before, right? We built the relationship with them. We had the hard conversations with them. We put them on performance improvement plans and or discipline. We've done the things that are necessary to identify to them what needs to be fixed. We've given them every opportunity. We've given them the targeted support. We've given them the extra supervision. We've done everything we possibly can to fix them. But they either cannot or they will not choose to perform at the standard that we have set as our expected standard. Then we need to exit them. The other element is if we have people, again, who we have tried to help. We've given them all of the support. We've given them all of the chances. We've given them the opportunities to improve. But if we have people who just consistently make choices that we put them in a category where we cannot trust them, they are low trust people, we need to exit them. We can't have a high performing organization if we tolerate low performance. We also cannot have a high-performing organization if we tolerate low trust. Let me give you an example. Oh, yes, sorry.
Oh, hold on. You need a mic.
She's like,
Please don't let that discourage you. It's just so that we can get it on the recording, that's all.
I'm just wondering if you can help us. Trust in this example is different than trustworthy person that he used. So are we saying trust? Is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think we'll get there. Hold that for the moment. If we don't answer that better later, yeah, you take that. I don't want it. If we don't answer that better later, let me know. But the short answer to your question is yes. To all. But what we want, obviously everybody wants this high trust, high performance person. Not everybody is. And so you take these others, somebody who you kind of trust, but you know you have to kind of keep an eye on them too. Like they'll do their job, but you got to make sure that you just kind of watch over because they might try to make some shortcuts or something. But they're a really high performance person. Yeah, that's part of supervision. You're supervising the person. Yeah, we want that person. A medium trust, medium performance person, someone who, you know, you still have to keep an eye on them, and maybe their work isn't perfect all the time, but it's basically tolerable. It meets expectations most of the time. Yeah, you're going to need some of those people. They're your steady eddies, as it were, right? People who maybe they will never advance beyond where they're at organizationally, but we can help them to get better, and we can, with some effort, that's part of supervision. That's what you signed up for, to help those people. A high trust, medium performance person, somebody who just doesn't quite get it, but you trust them, so you know that you definitely want those people. That's somebody you can coach potentially into leadership or into a high trust, high performance area. But we have to figure out how to address both of these areas. Let me give you an example. I have, before I came to, I think most of you know, before I came to Utah to work for the state, I worked for in Wyoming for a hospital district there. We had a surgeon there, and if you ever need a general surgeon, come talk to me. I'll tell you where you can get a really good one. Probably the best surgeon I've ever met my whole life. He's awesome. Patients love him. They get great results. We never once had a nosocomial or a hospital bed infection as a result of his work. And patients love him because they don't have to talk to him. They're unconscious. But in his interactions with his staff, oh my gosh, he's such a jerk. Like, he's a true toxic leader. He yells at the nurses and the surgical staff. If they make a mistake, boy, he calls them out for it right there and makes them absolutely pay for it. He's horrible to work with. What do you think we ended up doing with him? He makes so much money for the hospital. I mean, just so much money, because, you know, surgeries, they're not cheap. What do you think we did with him?
Chief of staff.
Yeah. Ultimately, we let him go. Ultimately, we had a conversation where we said, the board has elected not to renew your contract going forward. And we went for a medium performance, but high trust individual. Still doing the same kind of surgery, still having good results. But we just can't tolerate that. There's the risk, the liability that exists with that kind of a scenario is just way too high. You can't have toxic people. By the way, if you're just interested, these people right here, they're out of their depth. They're not necessarily bad people, they're just out of their depth. They don't know what to do next. They don't know how to move forward. You might be able to train them, you might not. But if you can't, you need to get them somewhere where they can be up here or exited completely out. And let me make sure I'm real clear about that. When I say we need to exit people, that means they can't be in the job they're in. It doesn't mean we can't employ them. They might be very good at something that we need, but it can't be the thing where they're causing problems. Has anybody read the book, The Anatomy of Trust? Speed of Trust, sorry. The Speed of Trust by Stephen M.R. Covey. I always thought that was a really interesting, like I'm going to rag on Stephen M. R. Covey here for just a second here, just because I can, and because I know that Lance worked for the organization for a while. But when I first picked up the book Speed of Trust, I saw the word Stephen and I saw the word Covey. Didn't pay any attention to the initials in between. And I just, Stephen Covey, of course I'm going to read Stephen Covey. He's great. Picked it up, started it. It wasn't until later I figured out this is his son, not him. And I thought, well, wait a minute. That's kind of, I mean, you're talking about a book on trust and you're just blazoning your name on there as if it was your father's, and you're not making it clear, son of Stephen R. Covey. Like the only indication is this M that nobody really knows anything about. And you're talking about trust. What do you know about? You're not Stephen Covey. Why should I listen to anything you're writing?
You want him to change his name? What's the deal?
Yeah, no, I just wanted him to write in big bold letters, son of Stephen R. Covey or something. You know, truth in advertising here. But actually his book is really great. And he actually is a very intelligent person who has a great deal of very important things to share. But he talks about trust being, the anatomy of trust being a combination of two things. You have your competence and your character. And each of those then is a combination of two things. So your competence is a combination of your capabilities with results added in. Right? You could be a very, very capable person, but if you're not using those capabilities to get the results that we need, then we can't trust you. You don't have competence at that point. Your capability is not what we can measure, your results are. You can't get the results without the capability, but you have to have both to get to competence. Similarly, when you're looking at somebody's character, you have a difference between, you have a combination of integrity and intent. You can have all the intent that you want, but if you don't have the integrity to follow through with your commitments and do the things that you're supposed to do and work towards those same results, then all of that intent doesn't matter. It's that age-old story of what's worse, somebody who tells you they'll do something but don't, or somebody who tells you they won't do something but then they think better of it and they go and they do it. Which do you want? Well, the person who did it, right? So you have to have both of those in order to get to this idea of a trusting person, a person who has a combination of both the character and the competence. And one of the things that's really, that he also points out that's really important to understand is that when trust exists, there's a direct correlation between trust and the speed and cost at which we do work. So when trust is low and we don't trust the people that we're working with, then the speed at which we're able to do the work gets lower. Everything works slower because you have to feel like you have to check on people. You have to measure them. You have to make sure they're doing things. You put all these checks and balances to make sure that they're doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. So speed goes way down. And as a result of all that extra work that you're adding to get the work done, the costs go up. So when trust is lacking, speed is also lacking and costs come at an exorbitant rate. The opposite is also true then. When trust is up, when I can ask you to do something and know that it's going to be done and that it's going to be done with integrity and competence, then the speed at which we accomplish things can go up because I don't have to spend my life checking up on you. I don't have to add extra steps to make sure that things got done the way they should. I can trust what you're doing. And as a result, costs for getting work done goes down. So this idea of trust, even though it sounds like this ethereal kind of metaphysical idea that can't be touched, we have to figure out how to address those and how to just identify and also measure levels of trust, because trust has a dramatic and definitive impact on our ability to get our work done, whatever that work is.
So what we're going to do now is explore an example in preparation for us as groups to look at some various scenarios, some hypothetical. Is it where I'm standing? Sorry, you guys think I can't speak for him. You think I'm a clown? I probably apologize. It's probably the volume,
I'm definitely
right?
a clown.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about a couple of examples. So does this look familiar to anybody? Anybody ever seen one of these before? Okay, there might be a few hands. I have a son who has a life-threatening allergy to peanuts. Okay, and we suspected he might. It was one of these things when he was born. My oldest son, we wondered because my wife has a life-threatening allergy to tree nuts, so all other nuts, not peanuts. Okay. And so early on, the pediatrician told us, hey, yeah, you just need to wait before you let him have any kind of nuts early on because he might have a reaction. And I am dumb, and I'm not a very responsible parent. So one day when he's like 2 years old, I'm eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I just dip my finger into the peanut butter, and I let him lick the peanut butter on my finger. I'm like, hey, this isn't too much. So like his tongue swelled up and everything. So yeah, I'm a bad parent. But we found out we didn't have to go to the emergency room or anything. So the point I'm trying to make is that we early on started buying what you traditionally call an EpiPen. Okay? You have to have it with you always. And it's really kind of fastidious because you have to have it everywhere you go. You have to be really careful not to make it too cold, too hot because it can ruin the medicine that's in the pen, the epinephrine, all of those issues. Well, I don't remember how long ago, but a number of years ago, you have to go get these roughly every 6 months at the time you did. And each time that we would go to renew them, the price would go up. And at first it was like, well, okay, that's just the cost of medicine and that's just the way pharmaceuticals are. But this continued on for several years. It progressively, each time we would go to renew his epinephrine pens, the cost would go up. And before you knew it, what we were originally paying about $90 to $100 for a set of pens ended up being close to $600 or $700 for a set of pens. So every year we were spending almost $1,500 for these pens that they're just insurance, really. I mean, you got to have them. You have to have them because all they really do is buy you a little bit of time to make it to the emergency room if you or your child ingests the thing that they're allergic to. So I didn't really think much of it. It's just one of those things you just say, this sucks. It's kind of like gasoline price going up. I don't know what else to do about it, right? Well, many of you may remember that along came, yes, right? Well, what ended up happening is the truth came out in Mylan Pharmaceuticals. So the backstory is this. Mylan Pharmaceuticals kind of cornered the market. And they did some backdoor deals where they were essentially the sole provider of epinephrine pens. And what's interesting is there wasn't any evidence of anyone ever coming along and saying, anyone in the executive leadership, there wasn't any evidence of anyone coming along and saying, hey, we're going to increase the prices. Do you know what they did say? They said, hey, everybody, if you can meet these performance objectives, then we can share some of these bonuses. Okay? And so what did they do? They increase the prices. They're like, well, the quickest way to do this and be able to achieve these bonuses is for us to just incrementally. And what's really fascinating is they did it incrementally. Even though it hurt, it was over time. Over a 5-year period, they increased, right, from $100 to $600. Okay? And finally, the pain point was so high that the truth came out. They call that ethical fading. And what it is it's this concept that you take individuals, people who are good, decent, reasonable, rational people, put them in an environment and a circumstance where there's pressure, and that progressively over time you find some, not all, but some of those same decent, good, rational, reasonable people will begin to rationalize. They'll begin to, it's interesting as human beings, rational thinking is a blessing and a curse. It's important that we can rationally think through, steps and be able to solve problems, but we're also incredibly good at rationalizing things, right? And so what ended up happening is the people within Mylan, over time, rationalized their behavior, increased the price, and it ended up, this mess. So they call that ethical fading. Now, I mentioned early on when I was setting up the agenda that I don't imagine that there's well, that's not true. I shouldn't make too bold of a statement. There might be a few examples in our history of DWS of some ouch. I'm trying to be kind, okay? I'm trying to be kind. Yeah. We won't talk about specifics. Yeah. Okay, so here's my correction on maybe not quite that scale. That's what I mean, right? But yes, there is, right? Absolutely. I can think of one, and I'm going to be careful because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. When I first started working at the West Valley office, I remember someone in that office being arrested because they and a partner of theirs they found a creative way to send, I think it was like send ABT cards to the house. They were creating, I don't know, it was just like they were creating accounts, sending ABT cards. It was, yeah, another example of ethical fading. Now, the reason I say that, I don't want to beat too much on that because that's maybe, Dale's looking at me, it's maybe the exception. But if we're not careful, our efforts as leaders and the pressures that we place upon others without context and without consideration for the impact might invite people to make certain decisions that, while not to that extreme, might lead them to feel the pressure to do things that are not helpful, that are not productive. Okay? That's really the point of what we're trying to make here. Now, let me give you a contrasting example. So, the Marine Corps, we've already talked about the SEALs, we're going to talk about the Marine Corps, we're going to talk about a few other of these, these protective groups, we're going to talk about police and what have you, but they have, as part of the Marine Corps leadership program, they have this course called the Leadership Reaction Course. And it's interesting, many of you have probably done something like this. It's just an obstacle course. And so they have a series of, I think, like 10 different obstacles, and you have your own unit, your team, and your responsibility is, there's a variety of different, the obstacles are each a little different, but essentially it's like, okay, get from point A to point B with all these limited resources, keep people out of the water because that's like lava. You remember the game Lava when you were a kid? Because then you die if you fall in the water, that kind of a thing. Okay? So we're going to watch just like a 1.5-minute clip of them going through this LRC is what they call it.
2, 3. Grab it. Pull me up. Hurry up. Everybody climb up here with the rope. Here you go.
We're ready to go.
All right, put it on the way. Okay, that's gonna work out right here. Get me as close to the red as I can.
All right.
Here we go.
Pull it up.
Grab dog. Duck, you ready? Coming back. Okay, good.
Leave that box, the board cannot touch the ground.
Start walking and then inchworm across to the other side. How heavy these ammo crates? Oh, they're super heavy.
Dive to one side.
Put it as far as you can. How far does it go?
It's not gonna make it.
No. Lift it.
Untie it when it's all the way at the bottom. At that point, you can use the rope for the rest of the guys to get down if they need to.
We'll push those across.
All right.
Where's the next one? Maybe the left
Nothing bad's about to happen.
Nothing bad can happen.
Can you tie it up there?
So who's dying to go do this? There's maybe a few takers, right? Any knee-jerk observations about this?
Yeah, to work together to get it done.
A lot of trust.
Yeah, a lot of trust, working together. What's the other one?
Communication.
Yeah, communication. Subtle, but if you listen carefully, it was interesting to hear some of their comments as they're communicating, right? Yeah. I would imagine there's probably a lot of what I guess we would call iteration, meaning try and fail and try, right? So let's try this. Does this work? No, that doesn't work, so let's try this, right? Now, this is a leadership training course, and they're graded. They're rated on on this course. What do you think are the performance metrics for this? What do you okay, time might be one of them. What else?
Communication.
Okay, communication. Any other thoughts?
If everyone made it.
Okay, if everyone makes it, okay, I think these are all great. You know what's interesting? Whether they made it or not is actually not one of the things they measure. Not even on the docket. Okay? Okay? Here's a few key takeaways from the Marine Corps LRC, this course. Performance on the course does not necessarily equate to performance on the battlefield. Okay? In other words, there's a few takeaways, but you can't necessarily replicate in a course what's actually going to happen in that situation, right? It's just really quite impossible to do that. But these other two key takeaways, and there's more, but performance is more than just capability. It's more than just knowledge, skills, and ability. It's one more, what I feel is an incredibly positive example of what we're trying to hit home here before we do some practice on our own, which is performance is just as much about impact, meaning my understanding of how my work is affecting other people. And that, while that's really tough to measure, and we're going to explore that a little bit, how do we start measuring this? It is the primary thing that they look for in leaders. They're looking to see the way that they interact with each other, the way they communicate, the way they support each other. That's all they're observing. Whether they actually completed the obstacle, it's not even on the sheet. They don't even use it. Interesting, right? Now, full disclosure, I'm not going to counter what Armin just said. Performance matters. Of course it does. But it's interesting that another elite group, high-performing team, is so focused on the trust element, the relationship, because they know that if they can find people who have that, the other will follow. The other aspects of the performance metrics will follow. Okay? So, one last comment, and then we'll get into some practice. So, I've heard it said before, I've said it before, this idea of, okay, well, what can we do to get the best out of our people? Okay? And it seems like a reasonable question. But if you really think about it, there's a fallacy in that question. I put up here an image. If I have that thought and attitude, it's almost like people are towels that I'm trying to wring and get the most out of them. Okay? Now, I don't know that that's actually what I'm thinking. My responsibility isn't like trying to squeeze performance out of people. And I know many, if not most, or all of you, and I know that that's not how you approach your work, your leadership. Our responsibility as leaders is to create an environment that invites people to achieve their absolute best. And it goes all the way back to this idea of what kind of a standard do we set? What do we help them focus on? What kinds of behaviors do we inhibit? It goes back to boundaries. I've said a number of times, as leaders, we get what we create and what we allow. So we should often ask ourselves, what am I allowing? What kinds of behaviors, attitudes am I allowing on my team? Okay? What kinds of attitudes and behaviors am I encouraging them to focus on? What kinds of attitudes and behaviors am I modeling for my team? Okay? So let's explore that a little bit. We're going to do a first part of this scenario practice. We're going to get into some groups. We'll take a break then at that point, so you can use the restroom, get up, stretch, converse, and chat. There's a little bit of setup with this. So first thing, on your desk you have, this is just a little resource that you might find helpful as you do this scenario practice. We are going to need groups of, I'm going to need your help because I'm not going to count you off. That would take all afternoon. We have 8 different scenarios, and so I'm going to let you all just kind of figure out, there's about 60, high 60s in this room, so we're looking at about 8 or so per group. Okay? Can I trust that you'll do your best to find to create groups of 8s? Yeah, so it's more like 4 groups on either side. Does that make sense? Do your best to try and get 4 as evenly distributed groups as you can. So let's do that first. That's going to be noisy for a minute. That's great. Once it settles down, then I'll give you your scenario and I'll give you a few more instructions. Okay. So as a reminder, the plan is, don't overthink it, and you don't have to spend too much time. We don't need a thesis or what have you. Just give us kind of a rundown of what your group's discussion was. Tell us the scenario. You're welcome to even read it. Most of them are pretty short. And then just give us an idea of what you brainstormed might be the implications of being on a team like this, doing this type of work with low trust. Okay? We all good? Same page? Okay, so let's start with 1. Who's your spokesperson? Is that you? Here. Okay. We pass that back to Chris.
Okay, our scenario was leader of one of the world's largest offshore oil rigs. The work team is responsible for the work that the team is responsible for is dirty, dangerous, and demanding. Historically, the team has had a history of less than stellar performance and safety concerns, and one member of the team was even tragically killed when attempting to make a repair to a piece of equipment. So some of the thoughts were around, if I'm the leader of that team, or if it, is that we often overpromise and give little delivery. We spin it that how good it is. We might even lay blame to the deceased of that issue, or we try to cover up the mistake, especially if there are new members of the team that might not be aware. We ignore just all concerns. It's finish and perform at all costs, regardless of safety. Yeah. If there's, we might undersell them as far as what money they would get, especially if there's bonuses involved for me or the leader.
Great. Okay. Awesome. Okay, great work. Thank you. Okay, group 2. I don't know where. Okay, thanks. I'm not going to know where you are. It's on.
Is this a hot mic? Okay.
Hot mic.
All right. So the scenario we had is a police department, and I have just been appointed as the new police chief. And, it's a fledgling mid-city, but we want to make our mark. And so we've got to change improvement and performance and culture. So a couple of things that we talked about is, first we want to come in and we want to blame the previous administration. They were awful, so I've got what everybody needs, right? I'm the best. And we're going to immediately point fingers right off the bat. If you're not doing a good job, you're out of here. We only want people that are going to perform, okay? I'm not going to ask for outside help, because I know it all, and it's going to go the way that I want it to go. And if it's not my way, it's the highway, so get out of here. And we thought that the best way to get performance, so you cannot steal this idea from us, this is the absolute best, is we are going to bribe with non-cash awards that may or may not arrive. They could come, they could not, but you will get a non-cash award for outstanding performance.
No better incentive than that right
those non-cash awards, when they arrive, may be in my office or in my home, but there's something in it for you. So that's how we would handle it.
We promise if you perform, we'll get you one by the time you retire. It's coming. It's in the mail. Okay, number 3. All right.
Okay, we are a mid-level manager of a sales team for a large national bank, and we have been given the charge by corporate to dramatically increase sales. So what we're going to do is jump and create this big goal without any steps. We're not going to explain the why. We're going to tell instead of listen, and elevate our own performance, and ignore any of the pitfalls. We also thought that we'll be focusing on a flash of success and not really looking for retention. And we thought that other divisions might suffer if we focus on this one product. Is that the one that we're still on that one? Okay, well, I've got it right here. Okay, and then that this would also increase the likelihood of fraud if we do it this way, and we'd be overextending our customers and maybe not giving them the product that's a best fit for them.
Great. Sign me up.
Sounds good, right?
Yep, I think we're going to go back in the corner here, right? Okay. Great work. Thank you.
So, I'm the CEO of Saturn Automotive. No, just kidding. We have been recently appointed as the CEO of a large automotive company, and we have been brought in because the company is projected to lose millions of dollars. Or Pontiac, if you want to do that one too.
Pick your poison.
Hey, pick your poison. Yeah. Tesla? Anyone? No. And you are expected to turn things around. So what we thought was we kind of use a little bit of different, like the low trust, but as we bring toxicity from the top down. In terms of, so as CEO, so goes the head, it trickles down through all the other, it permeates.
I've heard it described as a chocolate fountain filled with excrement.
There you go, yeah.
Flows from the top down. How was that for an image in your head, right?
Everybody
just went, oh. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah. Well, there goes my chocolate fountain at wedding parties now. Would be keeping commitments, make vague, elusive promises that can't be pinned down. So deliver results, delivering activities instead of results, maybe kind of like a phantom projection of like, we're going to turn the ship around and we're going to show all these vague results that may show that we're doing a flash in the pan scenario of turning the ship around, but there's really no substance to it. Right. And that would kind of go to the spinning, positioning, posturing, and manipulating.
Great.
How you're indicating those performance metrics.
Yeah, manipulate the metrics, right? Okay. All right, great work. Okay. Yeah, if you'll pass it this way. Who's the healthcare? Who's healthcare? Okay. Thank you.
All right, we have the healthcare administration. We're coming in as a new director of a nursing home that was on the brink of collapse. We must decide which of our current staff, including leadership, will stay or go. Additionally, we have 1 year to make the facility profitable. Our approach with little level of trust would be not reporting real information, hiding real information on incidents. The current leadership would cover for each other, so we wouldn't know what's really going on. We would get an increase in complaints from patients, and we would just blame it on the patient. We'd tell them, their kids, that it was their parents that was causing the problems. Everyone would be out for themselves. There would be, possibly people leaving because they felt like they were working for a place with no trust. What might the cost or consequence be of hyper-focus on performance? With little regard to the trust, we would have increased injuries, mass injury, workplace injury. We would likely blame that on the employees and tell them that was their fault. We would get bad reviews and eventually lawsuits.
Yikes. Okay.
You want to send your parents here.
This is exactly where I want to send my aging father.
We want your money.
Okay, awesome. Okay, great. Go ahead and pass it on to wherever that needs to go. You can see it up on the slide there. All right.
All right, so we are a manager responsible for several teams in a debt collection agency. And so the pressure is get as much money as possible. Otherwise, your job depends on it and your future depends on it. So we just kind of grouped everything together. And so I'm just going to throw out some things that we haven't mentioned first. But with this culture of low trust and the direction it's going, we'd be focusing on any way to collect money, whether legal or illegal, ethical or unethical ways to collect money. The focus would be a very silo focus. There's not a team. It's each individual will be doing what they can do to make sure they're not the last person. The image of, I just have to outrun my friend if a bear's chasing me. I don't have to actually outrun the bear. Type mentality. You would see probably embezzling of funds going on involved. You would see that the focus would be on not getting fired versus actually doing my job. And so kind of a focus on what behaviors would I have to do to make sure I don't get fired. You would have that targets would be moving targets. Since the goal is to get all the money as possible. Once you set a goal, it's achieved, you just increase your goal higher and higher and higher, which would mean you have high turnover. You would save money because no one would ever retire, so there'd be no retirement parties. You would probably go through a couple of mergers with the company.
That's interesting.
And you would basically be creating a hostile environment that rewards bullies to collect funds.
Man, you guys really, you listened to me. You took it to the extreme. This is great. Yeah, okay. Great work. Okay, next one. Got an emergency room.
Okay, so we all played, this was an emergency room scenario. We all played the doctor in charge. You are a successful surgeon in a busy emergency room. You have to lead a team of doctors and nurses as they triage and treat many patients with very life-threatening issues. So if there was an apathy to any sort of trust, we recognize there would be lots of blind spots, likely zero creativity or collaboration or desire to improve, a fear to make decisions, and people will die, and hospital will lose money, and there will be lots of lawsuits and malpractice. So the cost and consequences of that, in addition to the malpractice lawsuits, cutting corners, being less accountable. If you build on a procedure and you're part A of part A, B, and C, and something failed in part A, you might just default to that's not my job. At the same time, without any trust, there might be a lot of rework. So you might not trust part A. You're going to do part A over and then do part B, and then you're going to take longer. It is an emergency room. So people will die. Emphasis on people will die. Death.
Small detail. Come on.
There will be lots of unintended consequences like the ethical fading Lance illustrated for us. And like I said, lots and lots of rework. If people care about patients not dying, there will likely be lots of rework.
Great. All right. Nice work. Thank you. Okay, last one. SWAT team.
All right, so we had the SWAT team. So our scenario was you've been promoted as a major for your agency's top performing SWAT unit. There is immense pressure to increase performance, recovering more guns and illegal drugs, while at the same time building stronger relationships within the community. So one of the things that we discussed was that if you lie or deceive, you're not going to be creating a trust within the community. So busts will go really bad. You can't focus on your own objectives because you're looking out for the people on your team who you may have no trust in. You may be in a scenario where you're knocking down doors without warrants, or you don't have the proper permissions to go in. We also had a scenario where you can't recruit team members because people don't want to be coming to a team where they can't trust them or respect what they are doing. Morale is down, and you would draw in the wrong kinds of people because no people want to come to the team where they don't feel like they can trust people. There also would be a culture where you can't change because people come in expecting one thing and they can't really change it after something's been done there. So, and they don't feel like they have any consequences because there has been no people coming down on them about what they're doing wrong, and so they can't deliver the consequences, and they don't feel like people are holding them responsible.
Yeah, that's interesting. Awesome. Okay, great work. So this is obviously because you're all overachievers. Many of you started down the road where we're headed. But before we move to the benefits and the implications of high trust, let's talk about this. What are your thoughts as you listen to everybody report out? What are some of the takeaways? I mean, we're here to learn about how to be better leaders, how to improve performance, but also increase trust. Yes. Hold on. Sorry. I have to do the mic run. No, that's okay. That's great.
So we focused on worst case scenarios here, but I think as we were having our discussion, there were definitely smaller steps that led to those worst case scenarios. And I think that if we're all completely honest, we've been in situations where it would make it easy to slide a little bit, kind of that ethical sliding piece of it.
Yeah, that's great. Great. I'm glad you bring that up because we sometimes speak in extremities because they're interesting and glamorous. That's one reason, but also because I think you're right. It can help us to see where we might be headed if we're not careful. Because I don't imagine that I'm certain nobody in this room would intentionally find themselves on the back end of whatever everyone here described, right? But if not careful and mindful, intentional, we could be in that direction. Yeah. Coming to you.
Just a comment. It's the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Good intentions, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's great.
I think it could lead to defeatism. We've gone down this road a quarter of a mile, there's no turning back. Yeah. And so we keep making the same mistakes worse by not saying, this is wrong, we need to try something else.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, love it. Okay, you got it.
Breeds collusion too, right? Because at some point you may have a strong ethical or a strong integrity foundation, but a lot of times you're in a place where the whole herd is going in this direction. And so am I going to be the one that makes the wave? Am I going to be the one that's going to change the course and say something? Because now you're viewed as an outsider, and I don't want to be viewed as an outsider. So when collusion kicks in, you're in a place where I never thought I'd be here, but you get pulled into the stream and you don't want to move.
Yeah. Is the pressure associated with being the outlier, it's intense in some circumstances. I can't speak for anybody here, but even just a small example of that is my fear of looking dumb, and so my unwillingness to raise my hand in a meeting and just speak up and say something that's contrary to what everyone else in the room is nodding their head and thinking, yeah, this makes sense. And I'm like, wait, right? That peer pressure that we experience. Yeah, sorry, talking into two different mics. He's like, you're messing with things. Anyway, that's great illustration. Okay, good. Any other thoughts before we move on? Okay, we're going to turn the leaf now. So now you know your assignment is to imagine what are the benefits, what are the implications of us making an effort, and more than that, what would you do? There's some examples for some ideas of behaviors, but what other things would you do as a leader or as a member of that team that would help to try and improve performance and increase trust? Okay, have fun. We'll give you about another 8 or so minutes. All right, are we ready? Okay, we're going to hear from the oil rig once again. So let's hear give us your, paint the picture. What does a high trust environment look like?
Gathering everybody together and using all of the team to assess and plan.
Okay.
Empowering them to report out or speak up.
Great.
Identify risks and train and have continual or ongoing trainings.
Great.
A we attitude in ownership and accountability.
Great.
Even incentivize with a real reward.
Come on, that polo with the picture of the oil on the back.
And once safety concerns and production equipment safety, all of that is addressed, what is now the goal moving forward, and stressing working together and moving forward.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay. That the plan? Great work. Okay, awesome. Thank you. I'm game. I've done it before. Well, we're going to try it. We're going to get a cube. Okay, who's next? Oh, that's right. I've lost track. Okay,
I'm going to pass.
Please pass. Thank you.
All right, so...
You know what? I've really screwed something up. I apologize. And rather than just let it go, I'm going to stop and let's fix it. When you're speaking, introduce yourself, okay? Tell us your name and what's your division and your responsibility, okay? How's that? That's right. Righting the wrong. Thank you.
I'll even stand up. So my name is Jason Alcott. I DWS ESD supervise an outreach team.
Great.
With our situation, again, we're the police department. The biggest common denominator was transparency, just being very open with expectations, open with recognizing what the issues are, being able to listen to feedback from the different groups that are involved, whether that be the department, the community. Also important to give staff the opportunity to get to know us as a new police chief, to set those expectations up front, and also to be able to establish personal relationships. And then also being able to keep commitments, that helps gain that trust, and then also be truthful but tactful. So.
Great. All right, excellent work. Okay, thank you. Next group.
Okay, I'm Rebecca Banner. I'm with the Office of Child Care. And a refresher, we are trying to increase sales at our bank. So we would, with our team, explain why, give assignments, help people understand their piece of the goal, explain the goal, and let them have a say about how they want to get there and how they can contribute. Be intentional about the goals, point out what good success or what success would look like. Recognize how to and reprioritize shifting priorities of their current work. Start asking questions and listening. We would start offering support, provide training when needed, set smaller steps incremental to reach the goal. Stop assuming and build a system of follow-up along the way to make sure we're in reaching our goals or milestones, and then re-examining and changing if needed. Keep our customers' goals in mind and their needs. That's it.
Excellent. Okay, awesome. Great work. Thank you.
So my name is Michael Fairchild. I am a financial manager with the, support division. So we at Saturn have turned things around, and we are back on track to get our...
If only you had been in charge.
I know. We didn't even clean the fountain. We replaced the whole fountain and put chocolate back in it.
Replace it with the chocolate. Yeah, baby.
So what we, what we have done is we're going to listen first. We're going to kind of gain a lay of the land, see what is actually happening. Since we're the new CEO, we just want to get a baseline of what we have in front of us to do. We want to be transparent. We want to be genuine and truthful, which leads into confront reality, right? That this is a tough situation that may have results that might not be favorable for everybody in the organization, but we're going to do the best to manage that, and hopefully everybody understands what the expectations are. And that comes into clarifying expectations, what we're going to do to right the ship and make it a better place to work, and maybe, things that may need to be fixed will be fixed. And then we kind of added our own little twist was, we wanted to foster a creativity and inclusion. So like the old adage, if you keep doing what you've always done, you always get what you always got. So maybe there is some perspectives inside the organization that we could use to help, going back to listen first, to making that, turning the situation around.
Great. All right. Awesome. Great work. Thank you. Yeah. Please don't. It's brand new. All right. Great.
Okay. My name's Derek Larson, and Supervisor Eligibility Services.
And he
yes, ESD.
And I'm sorry, he has the coolest kicks. If you haven't seen his kicks, I love his shoes, man.
Oh yeah,
they're awesome socks.
They're Merrill's.
Okay.
Okay, so we're the nursing home that was run by the venture capital firm that was pretty much just trying to cut corners, cut costs, and make a quick buck. But now we decided we want to keep the place long term, have it be profitable. So we are going to, in order to create an environment of high trust, we're going to start being honest. We're going to quit lying to people. We're going to listen to our employees, our customers, families. We're going to admit when we're wrong from the leadership on down. We're going to ensure that everyone on our team is doing their part. And we look at what we're doing that's working well and what we're doing that isn't working so well. And we'll stop doing the things that aren't working well, and we'll invest a little and try and make improvements for things that would work well. For example, the food is terrible. I mean, it's terrible. You can't even eat this stuff. So
you're going to get away from the attitude, they can't taste it anyway, right?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. They
Great.
have visitors sometimes.
That's
so
great.
yeah, we're going to have some good food. We're going to have satisfaction surveys for the residents and their families. And the benefits are going to be long-term viability, success, employee retention, employee satisfaction, better Google reviews. Our reviews are terrible. So.
Yeah, that takes some work to turn around.
You know, Lance, before you go on to the next one, his example just reminded me of something that I thought was kind of interesting and a little bit humorous, but also valuable. The hospital in Rock Springs, Wyoming, this was probably 12, 15 years ago, they had the exact problem that you were addressing with this idea of the food here is terrible, and everybody, you have hospital food. It just has a reputation of being terrible all the way around the world, and so the Rock Springs Hospital, they actually went out and hired a very successful chef to come in and retool their idea of food. And so they took somebody whose passion is food and then provided him some training, because one of the reasons why hospital food sucks is because it has to be built to very specific clinical diets, right? And so some people, it might taste a lot better with salt, but some people aren't allowed it. And so you have to figure, but he took his passion for food, and then they gave him some understanding of the diets that they had to do, and then tried to make a mesh of it. And they actually turned that around to where the hospital cafeteria became the place to get a reservation for prom. And people were bringing their prom dates to the hospital. And so obviously the hospital made a big deal about that, and they'd have them go around their nursing center and stuff and make a big event of it. But, cool. Just being willing to look at that a little differently, to take and look for some level of trust, to say, we got performance we got to deal with, we got trust. We got to figure out a way to get those both so that we can have the results we want. They absolutely changed that entire environment and made it a community gathering place.
That's great. And if your date chokes on a piece of steak, you're covered. You're already there. Love it. That's great. Okay, next group.
All right, so we were the debt collection agency management.
Who are you?
Oh, sorry.
I don't know. What's your name?
My name is Zach Whitwell.
Right.
I'm with the WDD division, and I live out and work in the beautiful rural part of the state. So there you go. All right.
Wonderful.
So we were the debt collection agency, and through a recent merger, our management team sent us to DWS to attend the leadership series. So we just completed building trust and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so our focus would be to create a team and a culture. And so it would mean that we need to actually listen instead of just faking it. We would ask questions. We would share the good ideas, best practices, provide training, stop looking at the challenges, but look at the team's strengths and how to build that into achieving our goals and performance. We would create a team, a community that also portrays ownership and accountability, that there would be very clear expectations and goals. And we would use Brene Brown and to talk about brave leadership, create vulnerability, and to open up an honest communication with clarity with staff. We would focus on the whole path instead of shortcomings. Focus on the team success, celebrate the team success, take away the wins. We would stop incentivizing low trust behaviors. So we look at the team focus as create incentives for the whole team. We even joked that we would actually solve and create an incentive for trust. I'm not sure how you would do that, but we solved that over here.
Though, right?
And then we would also the results we would have very low turnover. Employees would stay. Production would increase. We'd meet our goals regularly. And we would actually have funds for retirements. And so we would have massive retirement parties.
Nice. That's great. Okay. Great work. Okay, next.
So
So I am Heidi Volt, formerly known as Heidi Little with Voc Rehab. I'm a counseling supervisor. We are your surgeon in the local emergency room. We felt like we would start validating not just a job well done, but also approximations and errors. We want people to admit when they messed up. We would trust our team that we work with. They are capable, they're trained, they're licensed, all of that good stuff. We would listen to our nurse because it is, oh, he's not even in here. Oh, it is, in fact, a kidney stone, okay? We would do that as a surgeon. We would let our team know that we trust them. We would recognize the contributions of others. We would emphasize teamwork. We would make sure that we're prioritizing our staff, making sure we have time for one-on-one or team meetings and/or team meetings. We would invite feedback, listen to creative ideas. We would know who our team is and their strengths. And build their talents as well. We would work really hard on building those relationships because in order to know their strengths, we have to have those relationships. We would recognize that there is no I in team. We decided that because we can't necessarily always train in an emergency situation, we would provide time before and after emergencies to train them on different things that they could become an expert in. And again, we would own our own mistakes. We would stop walking around like we're Zeus. We would, I don't know, apparently I'm Zeus today.
No Zeus.
Right? We would stop backbiting, a lot of that kind of gossipy stuff. Benefits from this, patients don't die. Yay! We would become the SEAL Team 6 of the ER, right?
Nice.
Some other benefits, the hospital will be able to stay open and we will be able to actually deliver on those non-cash awards. And the hospital will gain a positive reputation, maybe it be for their food in the emergency room or whatnot, but they would be able to become one of the area hotspots, and so we would increase revenue.
Great. Excellent. All right. Thank you. Okay, let's hear the last one. SWAT team.
Okay, my name is Caitlin. I am with DWS ESD. I'm an ESO supervisor. So our scenario, we were trying to increase performance while at the same time building a stronger relationship with the community. So the first thing we would do was we would create an environment of transparency. We would want to create a team environment where there were high ethics for everyone on the team, and we would identify the people who do not align with our ethics and get rid of those people. There would be consequences such as firing or demotions or anything like that. People will be held accountable. We will create a coalition within the community members and do listening sessions where not only we take the feedback, but we try and implement it. And so what we're doing is actually helpful to the community. We don't want to just take it, but do the listening sessions. We would want constructive criticism so that we can build on the relationship. We don't want to just assume what they want, but we want to actually listen and take their feedback. And we would just want to create an environment where we are being held accountable and we are listening.
Great. Okay. Excellent. Excellent work. Okay, great. So let's just, nice work, everyone. 4 pages versus 2. I love that. So many great ideas. As a whole, what are some of your, before we wrap things up here, what are some of your big takeaways? We're going to have one more group discussion, so don't move, but a shorter one. What are some of the takeaways from listening? Yes. Hold on. We need mics. Right there.
Something consistent with all the teams is active listening first.
Is that interesting? Yep, get curious and listen. I noticed that. I was going to check it up here, but then I'm like, no, I'll just keep writing it. And I wrote listen multiple times. Right here, Jason.
I think we have to be intentional and actually think about, where we want to go with whatever situation it is, because if you just let things happen, you might have good results, but you very well might not. But I think we're more likely to be successful in getting to where we want to go if we're intentional and making conscious choices about where we want to go.
Yeah, I remember a guy describing his experience when he was snorkeling off the coast of Hawaii, and he was talking about that there were a few things they told him he had to do in order to stay close enough that he was in a safe distance and he had failed to do some of those things. He wasn't intentional about following the protocol. And what happened? He slowly drifted away to a point where he was like, he thought his life was in danger. And that's always stuck in my head that's what happens. The current will bring us along and pull us away from safety, so to speak, or what we're trying to accomplish if we're not intentional. Yeah, Dale.
I think this goes along with listening, but I think one of the biggest mistakes leaders do is they go in and feel like they have to change something right away.
Yeah.
To make a name for themselves and show that they're producing work. But I remember probably my first senior leadership position. I went in for 3 months and just observed the team and met with them. And I think that probably was unnerving to them. Mm-hmm. But I didn't want to just go in and say, this is what we're going to do. I wanted to kind of get the lay of the land and figure out what was going on.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great counsel. Okay, any other big takeaways? Okay, we're coming. Mark.
Going to give you a kind of a tough one on this one. I think the answers are here, but we were the police department. Mm-hmm. I can see this for the large automakers and even the SWAT teams or whatever, but you come in, you're the police chief, problems, you fix things, you're being honest, you're being transparent, you're trying to tell them everything, but the reality is such, the transparency, does it include the fact that over and above me is politics? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And even if I fix this thing and it's wonderful, that can do something that I wouldn't want to, but I have to do it because they say I have to do that.
Sure.
Do you introduce that in your transparency right up front, or how do you handle that kind of situation?
Yeah, that's great. Do you have any thoughts? No, it doesn't. What are your thoughts? Did we understand the question? So let me see if I can recapture it. That I may have certain intentions, desires, goals, and objectives when it comes to either performance or trust, trying to create this culture on my team, but that there are at times, and we say up above, we could go anywhere. We're talking all the way to, many of you have federal regulations and protocol that invite you to have to do certain things that, while we hope never unethical, they just make it challenging, right? So what might be part of the answer? Yeah, go for it, Dale.
Sorry.
Please do. Yeah.
Lots of experience with this. I think it's important to be transparent to your immediate senior leadership team. Say, hey, this is coming down. It's not going to be popular, but we need to package it in a way that shows that we support it and try to look at what can come positively out of this and own the message. Because you can't just say, well, EDO decided. I'm sorry, I disagreed with them, but EDO decided, because then you're going to lose trust probably on your team plus with your leadership team. So anyway, that's what I try to do.
Yeah, it's a great question. Great question. Okay.
I think the other piece that can be part of that is talking about why we're worried about it not being successful. I think sometimes we're scared to even say, wait, does this make sense? And if somebody can't even say that and maybe talk it through, then more trust erodes.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Got there and then over here.
One thing that I found that's a vital skill in leadership that we don't talk about a lot is just awareness, social awareness, understanding the climate of what we do and what we work in. And so I think sometimes that also captures some of what you're saying, Mark, with political ramifications and some of those other nuanced things of what we factor into decision making. And so I think that just addressing that, like Del was saying, and being aware and knowing that, this is a piece of what we do. We have to be aware and factor those things in to what our decision making and our communication is. So,
good thoughts.
Some people also always equate transparency with you have to divulge everything. It's not a 1-for-1 ratio. Transparency doesn't mean I just tell you everything, and it's all, I'm just like, okay, hey, this is the way we're doing, this is the way it happened, this is what they said in the meeting, this is where we're going.
Right.
That is discretion, right? As a leader, you have to have discretion. As said, you're not going to throw your upper leadership under the bus. Yeah. So I'm the good guy.
Yeah.
You can't do that. But it's also about using judgment and discretion, because I think it's a level of building the trust piece. Because if you have the trust of your team that you have their back, then the level of transparency that you can have will, whatever is not divulged, will still be, okay, we're still in good hands, or we can understand that there are some things that are just out of control. You know what I mean? So it can transparency doesn't equal, you have to just lay it all out there.
Yeah, good thoughts.
Just to build off what everyone has already said, I think it's important too that we use we instead of they said this, so we have to do this. But if we do it as more of a we and do the understanding, like I can't remember who said it, but the why behind, I think Brooke said it, the why behind everything, but do it as this is what we're doing instead of they told us that we have to do this, then I think that's huge.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a few things that'll shoot down the message or the objective faster, right? If you haven't been there, then you're probably a fairly, sorry, I've got two mics. Okay. Yeah, if you haven't experienced what Mark's describing and what everyone commented on, such great thoughts, then you will. This tough spot of leadership where there's an element of feeling like I still need to be honest and trustworthy, but I also am a buffer and a filter to a degree. So it's like a part of us that has to decide, well, what do they really need to know that really is going to impact the work that they do, that will help them to know, what's necessary to achieve the objectives, but part of my responsibility is to filter out, do they really need to know this? Is there really any benefit to them personally and to them accomplishing their work? And if not, let's not stir the pot, right? Let's just, I'll carry it and I'll be the buffer, and that's part of the weight of leadership. It's hard, but it's a reality.
That's when you're going to learn two things. Mm-hmm. One, how well do you know your people, and how much do they trust you?
Yeah.
Because if you really know your people, you're going to be able to know this is all they need to know, so this is all I should say.
Sure.
And if they really trust you, they're going to be just fine with that, and they're going to walk away and not think twice.
Yeah. It's fun to see how all this ties together, right? The importance of building our relationships. The stronger the relationships we have, the more people know that we care about them and invested in them. The more we'll be able to bring the bad news, so to speak, and they'll be willing to move forward and accept it. Okay, so do you want to hear the rest of the story? And what I mean by that is these are not hypothetical circumstances. Did anybody clue into that? Okay, you might have wondered. Let me tell you just a little bit, very briefly, some of the details of each of these. Very, very briefly, because we're running out of time. There's an oil rig, one of the largest offshore oil rigs called the URSA. That's an acronym, URSA, 48 stories tall. That's massive, right? And it did in fact have a history of having issues, problems. And so they brought in this guy who was, they described him as a roughneck. He's like the tough man's tough man, okay? And he was really concerned about how to turn things around, because on a oil rig, it's not just that they have really high performance expectations. And one of the main ways that they measure performance is what percentage of time that the oil rig is actually drilling. And so if you're anything below the standard, I guess, is something like 97%. If you're below 97%, you're not producing. But then there was, in fact, an incident of a couple of incidences, unfortunately, a guy who was trying to make a repair. He got wrapped up in a wrench, spun around 12 or 13 times, did not live, right? What's interesting is the approach was really unorthodox. This guy at the time was having some problems with his son. And for whatever reason, a woman, she's described as being this hippie type. She lived through the Holocaust in California. She led some leadership training, and she came out. She met with him, he went to a workshop, met with this woman, and he learned how to be open and vulnerable about what's really going on. And his relationship improved so much with his son that what they ended up doing is flying this woman out, and you'd get these big groups of burly men in circles talking about all the crap going on, either at work, in their lives. You had big men breaking down and crying because their problems at home. I'm not advocating that. I'm looking at the HR director. But what was incredible is the URSA has consistently been the top performing offshore oil rig, always 99%, and their safety rating is through the charts, or it's off the charts. Pretty incredible what they were able to accomplish, and it was all because of not this hyper focus on performance, although it mattered, it's very important. It was the relationships and the trust that they had built amongst each other. They could speak up and say, "Hey, moron, don't do that. Okay, I care about you. I don't want you to lose your life. Don't do that." They could do that kind of a thing. Don't call anybody a moron in the job. Police department, this example comes out of, this is a different one out of Kansas City, but what was the name of the Castle Rock Police Department? And the quick story on this is that they also had a reputation and significant problems in the community, challenges, and the police chief came in, and he did very much what you all described. He just started to listen. He just started to listen, ask questions, listen, understand what was really going on, but then he set really high and clear expectations. And he responded to many of the needs that the police officers and then the other people who worked in the department had. Like, for instance, for many months or even years, they had been saying they didn't feel safe at night when they came out of the police station because the parking lot didn't have a fence around it. And he's like, this is ridiculous. This is something simple we can do. Little things like that, think about that for us as leaders, little things that help develop and build that kind of trust. And he transformed that Castle Rock. They're now one of the top performing police departments. This one, anybody ever heard of Wells Fargo? Wells Fargo is one of the most incredibly epic examples of ethical fading. And if you don't know about Wells Fargo, in a nutshell, they had over 5,300 employees that were terminated because they were doing things like creating fake accounts for customers, opening up credit cards for them, opening up new savings accounts, things like that, and then they would close them to try and stay under the radar before people would find out. Now, at first when this was discovered, the executives at Wells Fargo claimed that these were anomalies until 5,300 of them showed up. And they realized it was happening for years. Now, what was the genesis of this? The interesting thing is that so much of this originated from Wells Fargo's exceptionally high expectations for performance without realistic conversations about whether it was something that was even possible. So, for example, what they would do is they would cross-sell. Everybody loves cross-selling, right? But they would cross-sell, but then the expectation was, you need to get every one of your customers to open up 8 products with us. Well, people don't have enough money to open up 8 products, right? So they would start fudging. And there were so many people at Wells Fargo that felt like their job is at risk that they said things like, I would have never done that under normal circumstances, but I felt so much pressure day in and day out from my boss that I just didn't know what else to do. I had to put food on the table, right? Pretty exceptional, disastrous example. So we'll point fingers at Wells Fargo. Large American automaker. I'm not going to rehash this one. Most of you that anybody who's attended the Outward Mindset knows about Ford Motor Company, that they were projected to lose $17 billion. And that Alan Mulally came in, and the reason that Ford was able to turn things around was not because they reduced their performance expectations. It wasn't that at all. It was because at that point, Alan came in and did everything that you all described. He created a culture where it was safe to bring up issues and problems. And he had a mantra that he continually said to that leadership that trickled down. Think of the fountain. Trickled down, and it was, you're not the problem, the thing you're dealing with is the problem. He would continually say that over and over and over until people started to believe it. So they started bringing up the issues and they were able to identify the problems. Healthcare administration. This one is Plum Healthcare. Plum Healthcare is a company that their job is to come into fledgling nursing homes that are basically on the verge of bankruptcy. And they turn them around. Not only do they just turn them around, they are able to make them exceptionally profitable and successful in an industry that actually chronically does not have a lot of success, right? And here's a couple of interesting takeaways. One of the first expectations that they have when a new administrator comes in to take over a nursing home is they do exactly what Dale described. They are not allowed to effectuate any kind of change for the first couple of months. They tell the administrator, you get to go in, and guess what you get to do? Ask questions and listen. Everything you all described. For the first couple of months, they can't make any changes. One other interesting note, this is super, super important, I think, for us as we're thinking about potential for people and those who are struggling. It was very common practice that when they would come in, the previous company that owned the nursing home when they were leaving, they would say, hey, the only way you're going to make this survive is if you get rid of these people. And they would give them a list of the top 10 or so leadership. Get rid of them and then you'll be able to be successful. Well, guess what? Guess who ended up being their biggest advocates and ambassadors? Those top 10 people. Okay, it was all about the way they were being led. In almost every situation. Doesn't mean that somebody didn't have to go on occasion, but those 10 people ended up being some of the most successful and high performing because they were under new leadership that trusted in them and engaged them and all of the things that you all described. All right, I'm almost done. Debt collection agency. This is a company called CFS2. Does anybody that sound familiar? CFS2? They take a very non-traditional approach to collecting debt. Rather than trying to squeeze blood out of a turnip, okay, like a typical debt collection agency that's trying to get money from somebody who doesn't have money, they took a very non-traditional approach. And this only happened because of the way that they worked together, the cohesiveness and the trust on the team. Rather than just berating and beating people until they get money, they said, hey, these people don't have money, so that's why they're not paying us. And they don't have money because they don't have jobs. Maybe we should help them get jobs. And so they would start measuring their performance, not on collecting money. They actually measured their performance on who did you help get a job interview, who did you call to wake up in the morning and encourage them before they went to their job interview, who did you connect to community resources, okay? And CFS2, to this day, is twice as successful as any other debt collection agency because they focused on the metrics that actually led to what it is that they're trying to accomplish rather than the end game. Interesting, right? And then we talked about the emergency room. I don't know, what's the big takeaway there? The emergency room that we talked about.
I think that one was just the notion that the organization that looked on the surface to be the best performing because they had no bad outcomes, they didn't have lists of errors, were actually the ones who were causing the most problems because it wasn't safe to bring the errors, and so people were just hiding them.
Yeah.
And really, when they created an organization where it was safe to bring up errors, even though those errors would have to be reported.
Right.
Their performance overall as an organization in taking care of people and helping them to improve their health care shot way up because when things got brought up, they got fixed.
Yeah, and the big picture, mistakes are not necessarily the issue, not that we're encouraging mistakes, it's how we respond to them as leaders. If we respond to them in a way that causes people to feel like maybe they have to hide it, that's going to make all the difference. This one, I'm not going to talk about this one too much. You might remember this also from our previous experience, the SWAT team from Kansas City. But the reason I bring it up is because I had the opportunity to meet Chip Huth and spend a couple of days with him and hear more of his experiences. Let me give you a really cool example of when the SWAT team was focused on recognizing that everybody on their SWAT team mattered, and the people that they served, including those they have to arrest, mattered. What occurred to them to do, the kind of trust that they were able to develop in the community, things like, this is really cool. So when they would break down a door, because they're issuing a warrant, that has to happen, before they would leave, they would talk to the homeowner and they would say, do you have a family member that lives close by? We need to connect with somebody so that they can come and get your TV out of your house and your other valuables. We'll have somebody come and put the hinges back on the door and put the door back up. But, people now know you're not home. We want to make sure that there's nothing in here that can get stolen. They would just do little things like that. And what was incredible about that is he describes his experience over those years, the trust that resulted as a team, but also the trust that resulted in the community went through the roof. But so did the performance. The performance metrics also doubled and tripled over time because of their focus and emphasis on those more important things that you all described right here. Okay, so we are wrapping up. We need to do one last thing though. We don't want you to walk away thinking, oh, that was about our oil rig and a police department and what have you. Say, that's helpful, but we're going to give you just 5 minutes very quickly. Turn to your partners, and everyone, we invite you, I'm not going to enforce anybody, so if you don't want to share something with the group, but with your group, identify one thing that you feel like is a takeaway for you today that you can do to increase trust on your team moving forward, especially as we think about the performance year coming up? What's just one thing that you feel like you could do differently or better? Maybe you're doing it and you want to do it better in preparation for the upcoming performance year. Does that sound good? Okay, 5 minutes is fast if you've got 8 or 9 people. So turn to your partners. Ready, set, go. I will plan to a couple of things. I want to make some commitments. Here's some holding myself accountable. I'm going to transcribe. Do I need to transcribe the low trust stuff? Do you? I'll transcribe it. Whatever. I'm going to transcribe all this and share it with you in some sort of a handout, and then I'll share with you the 13 behaviors handout as well. So I'll email that to you. Before I turn it over to Armand, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for this, because my back was turned, but as you were sharing these ideas, I was learning a lot personally from your comments. A lot of takeaways from me today. So thanks for being here.
Okay, so as we just kind of wrap up, I wanted to just spend a little bit of time and come back to this little diagram that we did. I don't know which one's best to use. Let's grab that one. Because obviously we believe that, somebody's getting in. Yeah, that's a low performance notepad. This thing's getting termed. Any of you who know me know I love terming people. No, not really. I want to come back to this one for just a little bit because, I know pretty much everybody here. I may have only communicated with you by phone or in group sessions like this or over email, but for the most part, I've communicated in some way with most of you, many of you in person. And I can tell you that with only a very few exceptions, you're really great people. I'm kidding. No, I'm not kidding. You're all wonderful. Working with DWS is truly one of the highlights of my career, and you guys are wonderful. But I will tell you this, and I'll throw myself into this category as well. We are not all here. Not everybody in this room is a high-trust, high-performing individual. And you have organizational responsibility to deal with other people, and you have to measure where they are, and you have to try to figure out what to do with them. But you also have to be able to be self-aware enough to recognize where we all have our own weaknesses. Right? You might remember from other trainings where we did the little job map, and you considered your direct reports, and then your clients, and then your peers, and then also the people above you. And I just want you to spend just a couple seconds, because I know this happened. The moment I drew this and started talking about it, every single person in this room assigned a box to every single person on your team. I know you did it. Did you assign a box for yourself? If you were looking, and the reality is, this is not a place that you arrive. You don't work and achieve and get this and get a special medal that says, this is who you are. This is a thing that you aspire to, and you have to work at even when you've got it in order to maintain it. And it's different for every single person. I rate differently on this metric with Lance than I might with Lyle, than I might with my wife, than I might with people that I deal with in the community, than my own team. Individual members might. It's worth the effort to take a little bit of time and think about those people who you deal with, your team members, your team members meaning the people who report to you, your team members meaning your peers that you have similar relationships with, your team members meaning the people that you report up to, and just ask yourself. Don't go ask them. You don't need to. Just ask yourself and consider for a minute, where would I score for them? Am I a high-trust, high-performance person for them? And if I'm not, what do I need to do to address that? And if I'm anywhere here, I got to figure out a way to get that exited. I either got to become something different, or I've got to become something different. Because we've got to be we've got to be accountable to ourselves as well. So it's a really great exercise. Trust is an amazing thing. And so our final invitations to you is, first off, consider for a minute how you might increase trust amongst your team. You with them with you, them amongst each other, however. And then how might I help each member of my team better understand their actual impact on each other and how that affects the overall performance of the unit? Was that? Yeah. Trust is an amazing thing. It is so important. And Simon, at the very beginning, when we watched that little video with him, he was talking about the fact that we have such great metrics in business environment to measure performance, but we have few, if any, good metrics for trust. The other thing I would just recommend for you is, as we look toward the future here, that's going to be even more important. And so maybe be considering, how would we measure trust with our teams? How would we be able to throw something on there that we can address so that we can hold this kind of accountability as well as this kind of accountability, so that we are addressing the full person? Anyway, that's what we have. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Great to have you.